Hey everybody, welcome to the Labyrinth of Limitations, continuing episode 0. So we just left off talking about that diminished embellishment of what is basically... Now we're going to look at something we're going to look at 2-5-1, so 2-5-1 progressions that happen so much in jazz standards, and we're going to use that Tesseract from Dmitri Tymoczko to kind of see why Barry's theories work so well, and why it's not something that he's just invented, it's that he has found it and delineated it. He's shown us a map that's really wonderful for improvising chromatic harmony. Okay, this is from the Concert Repertoire for Classical Guitar. This is Astor Piazzolla, and it's a 2-5-1, descending by whole step, much like the ending of Stella by Starlight. So it goes like this. So, much like the ending of Stella by Starlight. Now I'm going to do kind of a Barry Harris, just move through those changes, and then I'm going to explain a little bit of why it works, the way it works. So it started out... So now I'll give it a shot. I'm just doing something. So let's see. So I just went through the whole progression, kind of, winging it with some Barry Harris ideas. And the reason why it works the way it does is really this Tesseract is helpful to see it. So if we look at the Tesseract that I showed you just for a moment, and we're going to come back to it again and again, and I'd recommend that book, Geometry Music. But at the top, we have a G fully diminished seventh chord of this iteration of the Tesseract. As it goes up, it's a lattice, so the same shape is right above this shape, and at the top of that one is G sharp, and then at the top of the next one is A. It just goes up. It's a loop. It's a complicated structure, but it completely maps chromatic pitch space for 4-note chords. So we can see F sharp 7 is related to G7, but so is C7. The relation is that as I move along the line, I take one note and flatten it. So G gets flat. What gets flattened? So I flatten my G, and I get F sharp 7, right? And I flatten my D flat, and I get C7, and I flatten my E, and I get E flat 7, and I flatten my B flat, and I get A7. So these chords are all related to each other, because the fully diminished seventh chord becomes itself at minor third relationships. Well, then it passes on its symmetry to the nearly symmetrical chords that are close to it, which is a complicated thing we'll come back to. But anyway, here's the tritone substitution. F sharp 7, well, its tritone is C7, right? So but you get the idea. So, that's the tritone substitution there. Well, let's look at something else. Let's look above the G fully diminished 7th chord. So I move up, and now we have the half diminished 7th chords that are right next. By what I do is I raise any note of my G fully diminished 7th, and I get some half diminished 7th chords. So I take G fully diminished 7th, and I raise the G, and now I get A flat 7, and that happens to be the 6 on the 5, what we've been calling in videos the 6 on the 5, meaning the minor 6 chord that I would play over an F sharp 7 chord. Something like that. That is. And then maybe I'll go to a major. Left side. Whoops. My ear's all minor right now, so I can't do it as well. Well, let's look at the tritone substitution. So if I take the what makes it C7, which is the tritone substitution, well, that is by flattening D flat and becoming C. Well, if I raise D flat, now I get G minor 6, otherwise known as it's hard for me to think of sometimes, E half diminished 7th. You can see it there labeled E half diminished 7th, G minor 6. So I need to make a Barry Harris version of this shift. So G minor 6 is what I did when I went. So when I got to the 5 chord, and what I did before that on the 2 was I just simply did C half diminished 7th, because that is the same thing as E minor 6. So E minor 6, I do that chord scale. I'll do it really simply with drop 2s here. So I go, and I'm going to go diminished, and then because it's related to the minor 3rd relationships of that chord, so now I'm going to do the G minor 6 instead of E minor 6, so I get to use this diminished to connect to that. And then, whoops. Sorry, I got confused. So that is what I'm doing when I improvise over this. I'm going, and then, right? Now I'm on to the next 2-5-1. So this is B half diminished 7th. It was B minor. Now it's B half diminished 7th. Right? So that is D minor 6. Whoops. Now on this one, C minor 6, I'll do a borrowing. So here I go, C minor 6. So I'm just doing that, and I'm exploiting the near symmetry of all of these chords. And we're going to talk about that more. There's a deep concept, this chromatic theory around the tesseract, around this. This is called, this is the geometric shape, or a part of it, the geometric space mapping all 4-note chords in chromatic pitch space. And it goes out to total unisons. It's a big thing. It's in geometry music. It's a great book. Happens to be the case that Barry Harris talks about every single vertex of this shape, and then he ends the conversation. So he points out, so what I did over the F sharp 7 that happens at the end of this progression was I went dominant 7 flat 5. I did F sharp dominant 7 flat 5, which is also in that shape. Barry Harris talks about that. If I take a diminished chord and I raise any note by half step, I get a minor 6, otherwise known as a half diminished 7th. If I lower it, I get a dominant 7th. If I raise 2 notes that are adjacent, so these two, so now I get a minor 7th, otherwise known as a major 6. If I raise non-adjacent notes, I get the dominant 7 flat 5. And that's what I did here, which is a beautiful sound. I'll talk about it more in the next video with Wagner and Messiaen. All right. Thanks for staying with me.